Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Last night was the debate between John Fetterman and Dr. Oz. If we're being honest, it wasn't easy to watch. It was frankly pretty disastrous for John Fetterman, who obviously is recovering from a stroke. And you could tell very clearly he was recovering from a stroke. I'll get to whether it was wise to have him debate and whether his campaign should have allowed him to debate a little bit later. But let's go through it, with the disclaimer. Obviously, this is not meant to, gang up on John Fetterman. I feel for him. It's understandable why he struggled. But at the end of the day, he's running for Senate. And clearly his performance is probably going to leave a negative mark for a lot of voters that might have been paying attention for the first time. I'm just going to start with one clip that Fetterman started the debate with a really awkward, obviously confused greeting to the audience. Let's take a look.
As lieutenant governor, you're running for a seat that could decide the balance of power in Washington. What qualifies you to be a U.S. senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody. I'm running to serve Pennsylvania. He's running to use Pennsylvania.
So obviously, a lot of people just pay attention to elections 2 weeks before. A lot of people who are not political diehards might watch a debate for 10, 15 minutes before changing the channel. So when the first comment out of John Fetterman is "good night, everybody," it's just kind of a precursor, kind of might give voters, passive voters, a little, eyebrow raise. Obviously, they know he had a stroke, but, he started the debate saying "good night," which is obviously awkward. There were other instances where it wasn't necessarily that his answers were so terrible. It's just that because of his cognitive impairment, he couldn't really emphasize his points. He couldn't really have any zingers, where you would watch and be like, yeah, that guy makes sense, or that guy, stands for what I believe in. It was kind of just making a point where it wasn't disastrous, but it also in some ways didn't make sense. Let me play this as an example.
Now, we all have to make sure that everyone that works is able to, that's the most American bargain, that if you work full time, you should be able to live in dignity as well, true. And I believe they haven't have any businesses being we can't have businesses being subsidized by not paying individuals that just simply can't afford to pay their own way.
That was Fetterman's response. They were talking about minimum wage. Dr. Oz dodged answering a $15 minimum wage, which we'll get to. But clearly, Fetterman was having trouble communicating and articulating his point. So it's not that his answer was disastrous. It's just that you can't really understand his answer because of the stroke. So again, it just doesn't resonate with the audience and doesn't help him. It hurts him. So now let's move on to policy, where, he clearly flip-flopped. And, most politicians, most of them are full of shit and flip-flop to win an election. But most of them kind of have a passable, I guess, response to their flip-flop or their change of positions. But John Fetterman kind of was caught dead to rights, flip-flopping on his support for fracking. A couple years ago, he was dead set against fracking in Pennsylvania, which is the right position for the climate and the planet. But when challenged on him now saying he supports fracking, it was just painful.
You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, "I don't support fracking at all." So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand and I do support fracking.
Okay, thank you.
So again, I don't really think the audience particularly, I don't think the audience cares that much about flip-floppery. Politicians flip-flop as they breathe. But the fact is, he didn't really even have a passable answer for the reversal of positions. And he kind of just looks impotent, frankly, in that answer. Secondly, which I don't think he was capable of, but an actual answer that would have been right on policy and also probably popular with the voters would have been to say, I support, a transition away from fracking because it's not good for the planet. The United Nations is giving us less than a decade until there's irreversible damage in terms of the climate crisis. We have such an opportunity, particularly here in Pennsylvania, to really invest and double down on clean energy, wind, solar, renewables. That could create, great union jobs for Pennsylvania workers, including those who currently work for fossil fuel companies and do fracking. We want to make sure they don't go without work, and there would be a quick transition to move them to clean energy jobs. Dr. Oz supports, the fossil fuel companies. Dr. Oz supports these fossil fuel companies that are price gouging consumers. 54% of inflation is actually companies price gouging, primarily oil companies. That would have been a popular answer. It would have been the right answer on policy, because fracking is horrible for the planet, for the climate. There's no such thing as natural gas. But obviously, he's not capable of doing that. He had a stroke, and he clearly is not cognitively there yet to answer questions, coherently, or make that kind of case on against fracking. So it was just, I don't know what to say. It's just painful to watch. It's just painful to watch. And by the way, on fracking, if you want the specifics, in 2018, he said, "I don't support fracking at all, and I never have," Fetterman told a left-wing YouTube channel. So that was the right position, which he unfortunately moved away from. I also want to show this because, again, it's not really a disastrous answer, but it's another case of him just not being able to articulate the way you would want a candidate to articulate during a debate.
No, here's what I think we have to fight about inflation here right now. That's what we need to fight about, inflation. Right now, because it's a tax on working families. And Dr. Oz can't possibly understand what that is like. He has 10 gigantic mansions. We must push back against corporate greed. We must make sure that we're also pushing back against price gouging as well, too. We also be able to make more in Pennsylvania, make more in America. When he had a choice to make his merchandise, the Oz label is on, he made it all in China. Who can you believe that can fight against inflation and pushing back against corporate greed for somebody that is choosing working in China versus over American workers?
So again, it's not a disastrous answer at all, but it's also not incredible. The truth is, Oz, made his clothes in China, just like Trump. All his ties and all that came from China. I don't know if the voters care that much about that, but Fetterman could have said, we need to institute a windfall tax on these corporations that are price gouging, particularly the fossil fuel companies. We need to institute a windfall tax on corporations. Whether it be the fossil fuel companies, grocery stores, electricity companies that literally are not passing off their increased costs to consumers, but are tripling and quadrupling their prices for no reason other than greed. That's the kind of thing that would be popular among voters that are really hurting on inflation. And they say their top issue when polled is inflation. But he's just, because of the stroke, he's not capable. Now, maybe if he didn't have a stroke, he wouldn't be a good debater anyway, but I don't know. What I do know is, some of the answers, they weren't disastrous, but they also weren't really prosecuting the case, making a good point, or saying much that would really resonate with independent voters, which independent voters will likely decide this. Moving on from Fetterman, Oz lied through his teeth, but unfortunately, the debate moderators weren't really going to challenge him. And Fetterman, because of his issues with the stroke, wasn't really able to, score any points against Oz when challenging him directly. The worst answer by Oz by far was this on abortion, which you better believe is going to be running on TVs in Pennsylvania for the next 2.5 weeks, nonstop.
There should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
Yeah, I want, women, their doctors, and the local mayor in the room deciding what the woman should do. I mean, that was just such a ignorant, out of touch, heinous answer from a wealthy, super privileged, scummy man. Democrats will run it on loop in Pennsylvania. The question is abortion, obviously it's a major issue nationwide, is abortion, and whether Oz is just reprehensible on it, is that such an important issue that it could compete with inflation, cost of living, jobs in Pennsylvania, and kind of, take the stench away, kind of lower the smell a little bit of Fetterman's performance. I don't know if that's possible, but that was a terrible answer by Dr. Oz. He also refused, if you watch the debate, he refused to answer whether he would vote for Lindsey Graham's federal abortion legislation, which would ban abortion federally. I think it was 15 weeks. Let's take a look at that.
Now, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has introduced a federal bill to ban abortion after 15 weeks. I know that you've been asked about this question before. If the vote were held today, you were elected senator, you're on the Senate floor, the clerk calls you, there's a roll call vote. Are you a yay or a nay? How would you vote on the Lindsey Graham bill? You have 30 seconds.
Lisa, I don't even need 30 seconds. I'll give you a bigger answer. I am not going to support federal rules that block the ability of states to do what they wish to do. The abortion decision should be left up to states, and specifically when John Fetterman...
You roll with Doug Mastriano.
John, when I'm done, John, you'll have your turn, John.
One moment, Mr. Fetterman. Continue, Mr. Oz.
I've been very clear on my desire as a physician not to interfere with how states decide. So when John purposely, knowingly misrepresents that to women, he scares them. He's purposely trying to alarm them, and the fear-mongering isn't working. Running tens of millions of dollars of ads claiming that I'm against all abortions when he knows that's not right, claiming that I'm going to be strict with Pennsylvania when he knows that's not honest. I can't be any clearer that I've been on the stage today. John Fetterman, if you just hear that one story today, I'd be really happy, but I know you're not going to, because you're going to go right back to telling the fables that you believe.
Mr. Oz, I want a 15-second clarification. You are saying that you would leave it up to the states, that the federal government does not have a role here. So are you saying you would not vote for the Lindsey Graham bill?
Any bill that violates what I said, which is the federal government interfering with the state rule on abortion, I would vote against. What I feel strongly about is that women in Pennsylvania understand what I'm saying and not believe that someone who's taken an extreme position like John Fetterman represents them, because most women do not believe that we should, at a federal level, codify 38 weeks of permission to have an abortion and have taxpayers pay for it.
So a yes or no on the Lindsey Graham bill?
I think I've answered it very, very clearly 3 times, Lisa.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Oz.
Yeah. So he wouldn't answer because he would vote for it, because he's a shapeshifter. And he would certainly vote for a federal abortion ban of 15 weeks. Yeah, I mean, we'll play one more. Oz wouldn't answer on a $15 minimum wage, which at this point, frankly, is the conservative position. Let's take a look at that.
Do you support raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour? Why or why not? You have 60 seconds.
I think market forces have already driven up the minimum wage. I was with a hotel worker actually here in Harrisburg a few months ago, and he was telling me how hard it was to live on the $15 an hour that he was getting paid. John Fetterman shoots too low. We want much more money than that. And there are many ways to achieve that, but John Fetterman thinks the minimum wage is his weekly allowance from his parents.
So he's not going to raise the minimum wage, even though he likes to talk about all the hardworking Pennsylvanians I've met around the campaign trail. I mean, Oz is your dime a dozen shape-shifting Republican. I think he used to be a Democrat. He will go as the wind goes. I think that his campaign before the debate pointed out that He has really, really poor likability ratings. More people dislike him than like him. So he tried to portray himself throughout the debate as kind of moderate, wanted to take the temperature down in Washington, D.C., bring sides together. All bullshit rhetoric we've heard over and over and over again from presidential candidates, Senate candidates, congressional candidates over the years. He didn't actually put forward any plan to decrease crime. He didn't put forward any plan to lower inflation because, frankly, it's all theater. I mean, frankly, whether it's Democratic candidates or Republican candidates, there's not much they could do on crime. There's not much they could do on inflation because we live in the United Corporations of America. The reason crime is up is because economic desperation is up. A lot of the increased crime is petty crime, robberies, theft, things like that. In a lot of cities, contrary to the, what do they call it, propaganda that's out there, murders are actually down in a lot of major cities. Why? While economic crimes, petty crime is up because people are economically desperate because we live in a new gilded age. When you look at inflation, over half of it is price gouging. That takes leadership. That takes the Democratic Party or the Republican Party actually threatening corporations with consequences for what I think is criminal price gouging. The Democrats aren't going to do that. The Republicans certainly aren't going to do that. So Oz didn't propose anything on decreasing crime, decreasing inflation. It's all theater. And honestly, John Fetterman didn't either because he had a hard time clearly, just dealing and, getting through the debate. If you watch the debate, Fetterman did better than I thought he would for the first 15, 20 minutes, but then he clearly was struggling. As the debate was going on, the betting markets, because there are political betting markets, started going significantly for Oz. Oz went up 13 cents. Fetterman went down 13 cents, if that means anything to you. I don't think this is good for John Fetterman, clearly. If you look at a poll that came out right after the debate, this is from Pittsburgh area online poll. Oz won the debate by 82%, Fetterman by 18%. Unfortunately, in politics, a lot of people don't vote based on policy. They vote based on tribalism, team red or team blue. And the people in between, in many cases, vote by do they feel they connect with do they feel they connect more with the Democratic politician or the Republican politician? Do they feel like that person is talking to them more or resonates with them more? And unfortunately, Oz, who is a quack doctor, he pushed, dangerous diet pills and all this stuff. He kind of wins by default because he obviously wasn't having the articulation problems that Fetterman was having. So as it stands now, I thought it leaned slightly to Fetterman before the debate. Right now, I would say it leans slightly to Oz. We'll see what happens in between. We'll see if Oz's awful answer on abortion hurts him, because Democrats will run that nonstop in Pennsylvania. For what it's worth, Fetterman's campaign says it raised $1 million after the debate. So money was coming in to Fetterman after the debate. But right now, I would say if you are a betting man or woman, it's not looking good for Fetterman.